Couple are launching a landmark legal test case against what they describe as a gay tax when it comes to NHS fertility treatment in England. 34-year-old Megan Bacon-Evans and her wife Whitney, who's 33, claim their local clinical commissioning group discriminates against LGBT plus families.
Ultimately, it comes down to the fact that there's an unfair financial burden being put on the LGBTQ plus community, and that relates to the eligibility criteria that is placed on us as opposed to heterosexual couples in order to meet the same level of requirement to where we can receive free funding of IVF on the NHS. Depending on what your local clinical commissioning group actually gives you, it's different as well. But there's a clear difference in the fact that for a heterosexual couple, the criteria is 2 years of unprotected sex, so no evidence and no cost. Whereas for a same-sex female couple, it is, well, in our case, 12 rounds of artificial insemination, which could cost to nearly £50,000.
Right. Which is an extraordinary amount of money. And
Exactly.
you say clearly that is discrimination.
Yes, essentially. I mean, ultimately, we would love to just have an equal playing field, essentially. That's really kind of what we're fighting for as well, just to have the same rights and opportunities as a heterosexual couple.
Yes, because we feel that in the eyes of the law we can equally be married and we're seen as wife and wife, but it doesn't seem to kind of go as far as being seen as equal in terms of creating a family.
So what would an equal playing field look like?
Well, I think it would be recognised the fact that obviously no matter how much we try, we unfortunately cannot create a family together. So even though it might not be medical infertility, or in some cases for same-sex couples it is de facto infertility. And so essentially that would be, in the first instance, potentially IUI, which is artificial insemination, being provided by the NHS in order to sort of meet the same level of requirements as heterosexual couples before needing funding for IVF would be the ultimate solution. But ultimately right now what we're just asking for is for there to be a recognition that there is discrimination.
So just so I understand that accurately, you are saying that you would require artificial insemination on the NHS, and if that doesn't lead to a pregnancy, then you would be eligible for IVF on the NHS. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that would be the ultimate goal, because at the moment just placing that barrier on the LGBTQ plus community where many people cannot simply afford to meet the criteria.
Yeah, it's essentially like a gay tax, as they're calling it, that's placed, like an unfair financial burden. And we've heard from so many of our followers as well that, they've spent a fortune and they've, maybe had 3 or 4 rounds, and then they may have had unsuccessful pregnancies and they just didn't have the means to go on. And, we've heard stories from that, many of our followers, and it's just, we realized quickly that this issue doesn't just affect us, it affects the whole community.
Yeah, and even if you may know you have an infertility issue, for example, often they still will need you to self-fund the required amount of artificial insemination.
Understood. And what do you say to those who might say, listening to you, you're not infertile? This is not a fertility issue.
I mean, it's still a fertility issue, Monica. It is technically infertility and a fertility issue, and at the same time, it's just about, the fundamental right of everyone deserves to have a family. And if provision is being provided for one section of society but not for the other, then that's where the discrimination comes in.
In response to all of that, the NHS Frimley Clinical Commissioning Group said the fertility services we provide are based on NICE guidance, and while we can't comment on individual cases, we will fully engage with any legal proceedings.